You're listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line, and make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine to get a notification whenever we go live. Jeff, how are you doing this week?
I'm good, and I want to reinforce it before we get going. Like, I am actually in a good mood, a positive mood. It is the actual stories that may have me coming across as kind of punchy, okay? A couple of these did get me kind of riled up,
Whoa.
to be honest. So I just want to say beforehand, I'm good. I'm not crabby. I'm not irritated. It is just what we're going to talk about here that kind of got me fired up. So
Great.
I am doing well. I'm doing
Just
great.
went from like a 9 to a 7. Jeff, Jeff is over here. Anna, how you doing?
Oh, I don't have a straight up PSA for you guys. Just a regular week for me.
All right, I guess I was overall pretty neutral on the stories, but we'll see if you can stir up any emotions, Jeff. But before we get started with our first story, we have a word from our sponsor, Oil Eater.
Oil Eater's household cleaners, industrial cleaners, and industrial equipment are specifically designed to replace dangerous solvents and are used throughout the world. Our safe water-based formula dissolves grease and grime for almost any surface and leaves a fresh, non-chemical scent. Our ultra-concentrated formulas are perfect for light, medium, or heavy cleaning and can be used on shop floors, in parts washers, to clean equipment, and more. VOC compliant, Oil Eater will do an excellent job in a multitude of applications, safely and cost-effectively, while reducing your chemical usage. Safe for the user, safe for the surfaces being cleaned, and safe for the environment. For more information, visit oileater.com or call 800-528-0334.
And we're back. And just a reminder that you can go to the link below or in the description of the podcast to register to receive a free sample of Oil Eater. Our first story this week. U.S. official warns of risks posed by heavy electric vehicles. Jennifer Homendy is the head of the National Transportation Safety Board. On Wednesday, she expressed concern over heavy electric vehicles and the threat they pose if they collide with lighter vehicles. Homendy referenced the electric Hummer that weighs about 9,000 pounds. The battery pack alone is 2,900 pounds, roughly the entire weight of Andy Zoll's Hyundai Elantra. Homendy said, quote, "We have to be careful that we aren't also creating unintended consequences. More death on our roads."
Was that part about Andy Zoll's Elantra in the original story?
No, that was a bit of an addition. I was like, sure.
They did give a similar comparison.
Yeah, they said actually a generic Honda Civic, to which I turned around. I'm like, does Andy drive it? No, it's an Elantra. Is that way about the same? It does. Good. Jeff, back to the more serious note. How do we prevent more death on our roads?
Well, it's about the operator, not the equipment,
Yeah.
first of all. This is the first one that got me going, because what you've got here is a bureaucrat standing up there saying, hey guys, there's this thing and it could be really bad. I don't know what to do about it, but it could be really bad. We got to be really careful here. And this is in the face of every market indicator, including the people who make these vehicles, saying, hey, in the next 10 years, if you want to buy a new car, we're pretty much going electric. That's what's going to happen here. The infrastructure is being addressed right now. We know we have to do all of these things primarily to gear up for electric vehicles. This is just going to become a social norm. You can push back against it. You can have your personal feelings about internal combustion engines versus electric vehicles. That's all fine. I have no problem with that. And I'm not trying to take a side even on that. But for this, again, this government leader, quote unquote, to stand up there and basically try to scare people into letting them know things that they should already know when they see these vehicles on the road. We know the batteries are bigger. The very context of it being an electric vehicle means it's going to accelerate more quickly. This is all known. This isn't new, but it comes across as a scare tactic of sorts. So people can get alarmed and say, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And the reality is there are very simple things that can be done that she chose not to address.
Yeah.
When you look at NASCAR, okay, just as an example, they have restrictor plates. They basically put plates over the front of the car so there's less airflow coming in, okay? It slows the car down. You can do things like this with electric vehicles as well. There are speed limiters on almost all of these electric vehicles in order to conserve battery power. We can do this. We can also put electric controls in there to slow the acceleration speed. If you're going to advocate for these things, that's fine. But then come out and say, hey, there's this problem, but there's also these solutions. We need to figure something out here. Don't just scare people by throwing out a bunch of facts. This just comes across as kind of CYA politics, and it's incredibly annoying because all it does is cloud the judgment of potential EV buyers, in my opinion.
Doesn't that just stem from the generally toothless nature of the NTSB? Because the NTSB, the NHTSA, they're the ones that make the rules. They're the ones with the penalties. The NTSB, they've kind of always sat there on the sidelines being like, hey, 10 facts here. Do what you want with them, you know?
But do that internally. Talk to the vehicle makers. Talk to all the other principals. To just come out with a blanket statement like this, it does nothing other than get some headlines and get people second guessing the future of electric vehicles. And again, if you don't want an electric vehicle, that's your opinion. But the people who make the cars are saying this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, well, and maybe, I don't know, Anna, I'm interested to see how you feel about it, because maybe this is just her trying to get a little bit more legs, get a little more steam behind the conversation, just to push it forward a little bit, rather than something that would happen behind the scenes.
I mean, maybe, but it's sort of an irresponsible approach to that discussion. I agree with Jeff. I mean, she said, there's a mismatch in weight between EVs and smaller internal combustion vehicles. Well, yeah, there's also a mismatch between smaller internal combustion vehicles and pickup trucks.
Yeah.
And, like bigger ICE vehicles, that's already a problem. We already know that. That's why it's become less safe on U.S. roads, because more collisions result in fatalities because of heavier weight vehicles. These don't even take into account the 4% of vehicle sales that are EVs at this time. These are vehicles that are already on the road. So to come out and say that this is an issue with EVs, I think doesn't speak to the fact that it's an issue with the size and weight of really the style of vehicle that's being put out on U.S. roads already. To me, this is an important point, when you talk about vehicle weight as a risk factor. But to me, like focusing on EVs only just feels sort of like a red herring. None of these vehicles are safe when you make contact with them in a crosswalk, for example. You know what I mean? Like the height of them when people...
Spoiler alert, that's what she's going to come out with in February.
Well, I mean, obviously, if you're in a Honda Civic or a Hyundai Elantra on a highway and you collide at a high speed with a massive truck, whether it's 2/3 of the weight of the EV version of that truck, you're not going to be in a much better position at a high speed. I don't
think that an old Hummer, you'd fare any better than these new, heavier Hummers.
No, exactly. And to Jeff's point, I think if we're talking about issues of solutions here, if we're talking about acceleration issues, if we're talking about blind spots, anything to do with training, we've talked about this before. I'm all for making sure we have the agency to require people to know how to drive their vehicles. If we have features and components in there that make them different now to drive, let's address that. Let's figure out a way to make sure that people understand what they're doing. If they're accelerating safely and effectively, if they're accelerating too fast, then let's figure out how to deal with that, right? From a pedestrian safety perspective, urban planners have been studying this for decades, how to make cities safer to be a pedestrian in and survive. We know the information, it's there. We know how to do this. Yep. Thirdly, drivers, stop with the substances. We know that that's a huge contributor to fatalities, to injuries and crashes. The number of people that are driving under the influence of something, drugs or alcohol, that's another huge factor, I think, in looking at safety on the road. So there's so many other factors involved here for us to look at this issue and think it's an issue of just EVs creating this problem. I don't think that that's fair. I think it's disingenuous at best.
So you don't think it's just her bringing it up saying, hey, maybe think about this. You think this is her trying to tear down the EV industry?
I don't know if that's true. I just I don't from her perspective, she's an intelligent person. She knows what is happening when you do that. When you say, we are concerned about EVs because of their weight. That's what she's saying here, right?
Yeah.
There's lots of other concerns that are not being brought up here. And, concerns that exist already in terms of heavy vehicles already being out on the road.
It felt like she needed to say something, and this is what she went with.
Okay.
And as opposed to there being a part B to her commentary, is she just stopped. This is the problem. See ya.
Okay.
That doesn't make sense.
Peace.
Well, we have covered this before about how the weight is a problem. And I do understand the frustrations over an EV first agenda, as well as concerns like this. I at least understand the talking points. I did find interesting points in the comments about the toll these cars are going to take on our roads, driveways, and garages. Jeff, you talked a little bit about the infrastructure, but there's going to be a lot of infrastructure that has to take place in terms of roads, driveways, and garages as well in order to be able to hold all these EVs. One thing I found that was interesting was from the British Parking Association, which has been warning that EVs could cause catastrophic damage, particularly to multi-story and underground parking garages. I just found this particularly interesting because it wasn't a point that I ever thought of. I thought about definitely the wear and tear on roadways. That was going to be something that was going to be more of a concern. But structural engineer Chris Wapples said that we haven't had an incident yet, but he suspects that it's only a matter of time. I thought that was particularly interesting because we talk about all this weight and how it's going to play a role on the roadways. It might be a bigger problem for like larger apartment complexes, larger, parking structures, stuff like that. That, according to one of the articles, they were built to standards from the 70s in terms of car, like the normal car in the 70s. Yeah. That's something, a point that maybe,
I think I think that's a fantastic point. I think it's definitely worth mentioning and commenting and having a conversation about. So do so.
Yeah. I'd actually
again, make your commentary valuable.
Yeah.
There's no value to anything she said there. It's a bunch of facts that was only presented from one side of it.
No, and you know what? I'd actually be interested to see what the entire speech was, because this was just the write-up off of her speech. So it might be worth some further investigation to see if she actually went into any other detail.
Right.
Or she just stood in front of all these reporters and she's like, all doom and gloom, we'll see ya. The other point I want to raise is that there's only one or two things that make sense here, and that's the Hyperloop and urban air mobility. I joke about it, but really a lot of it I think comes down to the number of vehicles that are going to be on the road.
Yes, I agree.
That could be remedied with more robust public transportation system. And while people like to be flashy with the Hyperloop and, flying taxis, really we could just do a lot better job of improving the infrastructure we have. Our next most popular story, is this another one, Jeff? Are we going another step up on the soapbox?
There's another one coming up that really.
Oh man, the gears are audibly grinding. Our next most popular story this week: terminated worker ordered to pay back employer for, quote, time theft, which kind of sounds like a Van Damme movie. Reach CPA is an accounting firm in Canada. The company recently made headlines after it fired a worker based on tracking software data. It wasn't just that the company gave the worker the axe, but they wanted money back for time stolen. And then a court agreed. Reach uses a program called Timken, which said Carly Bess was completing non-work related activities while on the clock. They accused her of this time theft. Time theft and time camp. This is a whole series of Van Damme movies. Bess said she was wrongfully terminated and sued, saying she was owed $5,000 in unpaid wages and severance. Reach disagreed and filed a countersuit for wages paid when Bess wasn't working. In a single month, the employer said they were cheated out of 51 hours. Timecamp uses screen capture videos to track what documents a worker opens and how long they work on them. Bess said she printed the documents to work on hard copies, but wouldn't you know it, the software tracks that too. The courts agreed with the company and said Bess had to pay back $2,756. Jeff, is there a story older than lying on a time card?
Probably not.
No.
Fred
Flintstone was doing that in the quarry.
Well, he had the punch thing, right? Like with the bird chomping down.
Yeah,
on
him and the bird were in cahoots.
Yeah. Oh, No, I mean, I definitely sided with the company on this one, especially after you look into it a little bit more. She knew this software was going to be part of the deal, tracking her in terms of when she was online, what she was doing, all of that kind of stuff. Plus, you work for an accounting firm.
Yeah. If there's anyone that's going to crunch the numbers.
I mean, accounting for, I mean, it's all right there. I think what this reinforces, there's so many places, and I think employees as well, really embracing this work from home dynamic. It's kind of a perk or a benefit or even something you seek out when applying for a job. Well, that comes with certain measures that you need to be willing and able and understanding to it, that are going to be addressed. And this is one of them. I think it's great that they were able to get back for time lost. I mean, we have all worked with people who just
precedent.
I love it because, I mean, there are definitely people who steal time every day. Okay. And you can argue with that dynamic and what that means, but you have to get something done. And that's why I worked for an advertising agency for about 8 months. The time cards killed me, man. I hated being accountable 15 minutes of time, like all day. What'd you do every 15 minutes? Who can we bill that to? That was frustrating and hard. That does not work for me. So when you're getting into these situations and you know this software is there and you know that you're going to be held accountable in this way, if that's not for you, don't sign on.
Yeah.
It seems that straightforward. And the fact that they were able to recoup some damages, I think it's great.
Or don't ask for it, or don't sue as a result afterwards.
Yeah.
There were so many things that she could have done differently, and we'll get into that in a minute. Anna, what were your thoughts when you initially read the story or saw the report? Just because I know that I had an initial reaction. I always have a natural worker first reaction to stories like this, where I'm like, okay, come on. But then the more I read the story and got into the details, I became increasingly frustrated.
Yeah, it was a frustrating story because there were, like you said, some kind of missteps on behalf of the employee in this sense. But to me, I think I looked at it differently than how Jeff saw this case. And I know what happened in Canada, but to me, the ramifications of something like this occurring here, I think is kind of scary. It's not a precedent that I would like to see because I know that it's defensible that this company is entering into a compact with this person to do this work for this wage. But I think we don't want to work in a world where it's not exceedingly difficult to claw back wages, especially when the evidence is this click tracking software, which is by no means, I think, a certain and objective view of one's efforts, in my opinion.
True. And she had mentioned having trouble with the software. Right.
And to me, that's where the slope starts. Like, if you look at, they are accusing her of not being effective. Will companies be able to force wages back from somebody who makes a mistake, who say a project goes poorly, say it's over budget, say it's over timeline, say you're a scientist and your experiment fails. You know, like there's so many opportunities I feel like here, if you set this precedent that the company can come in and say, hey, you didn't do what we asked you to do, give us back. Wow, how much money? I mean, $2,500, an entire year's worth of salary? We don't know. Yeah. I mean,
we had a down year. We're taking all the salaries back.
Right.
You clearly didn't hit your sales goals.
I just, typically when, you discover that somebody's being ineffective, the recourse is for the business to fire that person, which they did do in this case, right? I think her countersuing and them countersuing, like that was where things got a little bit crazy. But I don't know what they got out of it in the end either. Like $1,500, $2,500 back, something like that. When companies are so strapped for finding talent and you plug this company name into Google, like this is going to be the first thing that you see. And I don't know. I just don't know if it's worth it to the way that they've been characterized in this case as being like an intense micromanagement of the scenario. The click tracking software, if you're looking for results, I think evaluate your employees based on that, not by some arbitrary criteria of how often they open a document and how long it's open, how many clicks they make on their keyboard. Like, you're paying them to close business. You're paying them to complete projects, like whatever it is that you need to do. To me, it's like, who cares how the work gets done, only that it gets done. And I just think some of these tracking mechanisms they have so much negative impact on the workforce, first of all. People hate them. People quit because of them. We know people who have quit because of them from jobs that they would have stayed at. And I just think that, a company utilizing this, like, in the end, I don't know. I would never work there. Seeing
No.
this, it's not an appealing work environment to see. And I know that they got kind of dragged into this case ultimately in the end. But this type of oversight, that's nothing that I could handle.
It is definitely frustrating. And I understand that part of the $2,800 was a bonus of some sort that she was paid bonus, or another payment that she was paid at the beginning that, she would have probably had to pay back anyways, kind of like when salespeople get paid commission in advance.
Yeah.
Jesse, who's watching us live, thanks, Jesse, always good to see you, says, gonna see that review on Glassdoor. And Jeff, that is the biggest point. I get both of Anna's points about this being a slippery slope. I think so too. That is a dangerous precedent. And you just don't want to be reach.
I disagree. This goes the other way.
Yeah.
Because if you're a client, or if you look at their website, they are looking at small businesses that are looking to streamline operations, cut costs, get more out of everything, out of their cash flow. If you hire this accounting firm and you know that they are monitoring the people so that the billable hours that you're being charged are being monitored this closely, that tells me I want this firm taking charge of my finances.
But that
But if
doesn't
you don't have anyone
Right.
to work for you to bill those hours,
But not
because you're an
everybody-
intense micromanager.
It's not micromanaging. If you know going in, and she knew going in, this was part of the deal,
Yeah.
then this is your operating environment. If you don't want that, I wouldn't want it. Okay, I'm not
Yeah.
advocating for it. I wouldn't want to do it either. I wouldn't want somebody looking over my shoulder like that. But you knew it going in. You knew this was the deal. Again, if you're one of these customers of this firm, you're like, that's awesome, because I know they are not going to let people waste time. I know I'm not going to get billed for time that wasn't being used specifically for what I need.
Anna?
Yeah, but it does not change the fact that now every time you plug this company's name into Google as somebody who's looking for a job, you see that they took wages back from an employee. Like, I would never set foot in that door. So I know that you're talking about from a customer side, maybe this helps them get people's business. I don't know, maybe, but I don't think it gets people to work for them.
And so there was a lot of wrong with this one. And I think we're talking about a couple of different things here. Like I had mentioned before, my initial reaction was, I hope this was an excuse to kind of fire a bad employee and not the only reason, which it kind of seemed like it was, because my initial reaction was also that micromanagement is soul crushing. But after I continued to dig into this, I mean, she kind of just had it coming. Do you know how many total work hours there are in a month, 4 weeks? 160. To say she didn't work 51 hours, man, there was some real...
But how does she defend that? It's like a one-sided case.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? How does she defend and say, like, no, I mean, she's trying to say, like, oh, I was working during that time, but, like, they really have the leverage in that situation because they have this tracking software that is just sort of, I don't know, vague, and how do we know how effective it is in really tracking productivity? I don't know.
I think if she had a better argument, I would have taken her side a little bit more than it seemed like she said, no, I printed them all off and then I worked on them. And then they said, no, you didn't. We can see that too. And then I was like, all right. If she had additional arguments other than that,
yeah,
I think that would have been a better look. Now, we kind of talked about it in passing, but so in February 2022, Bess approached her management because she said she was feeling unproductive. That's when they installed Timecamp. So this isn't something that's necessarily on everybody's machines. This was a tool meant to try and help her. However, did not. Bess says she had problems using Timecamp and couldn't get the program to differentiate between time spent working and time spent on the laptop for personal use. That was one of her excuses. But remember, it takes videos, which were then submitted to the court and showed Timecamp differentiating between work and non-work activities. So again, I think we might have just had like a pretty bad employee here also.
Maybe, yeah.
In March 22, she basically admitted lying and then was fired, where they asked her about specific projects that she said she opened in her time card, and she just said, yeah, I didn't do that, but I'm gonna. So another part, though, is that many companies are adjusting work from home opportunities. I think stories like this really don't help things, especially with, work from home. For the people that can do it and do it well, it is incredibly efficient and really suits their personalities. For people like me, it does not work. It's a disaster, on an ongoing, regular basis. I can do it day to day like I did yesterday, and it was perfectly fine and productive. But I just, I don't want to see these work from home opportunities go away as a result of bad actors like this, because I do think that they are very beneficial in certain roles for certain people. All right. Our next most popular story. Is this another one, Joe?
No.
Okay. All right. We got
You
Calm
okay?
Jeff now. Calm Jeff now.
Man, are you really?
I'm really interested to see which one it is. I'm interested to see which one it is. All right. Before we jump into the next story, we have Mark Waterman, who's joining us live. Thanks, Mark. It's good to see you. The expectation of work will likely be linked to the compensation. High expectations, high compensation works for me. Yeah. Anyone disagree with that?
I don't.
No. Agreed, Mark. Our next most popular story, bearings giant to close Longtime plant. Timken is a major manufacturer of engineered bearings and industrial motion products. This week, the company told employees at its factory in Gaffney, South Carolina, it was closing this year. About 225 employees will lose their jobs as Timken streamlines and overhauls its manufacturing footprint. At one time, the company had more than 1,000 workers in Gaffney. Workers will be paid severance and can still apply for positions at other Timken plants, the closest of which is about an hour away and on the other side of the North Carolina border. The Gaffney plant opened in 1971. It was the first factory in the area to produce something other than textiles. Anna, it seems like the area is losing a major manufacturer, but it might not be terrible for employees currently with this labor crisis that manufacturing is going through.
Yeah, luckily the textile industry will be able to prop things up for this area. Just kidding. Cherokee County Development Board's executive director, Jim Cook, said that the plant's closure was like losing a good friend. I thought that was a sad quote. Yeah. But in speaking to the point here about the newly available workers being a boon to the area, Cook also added that the county as a whole has had more major business and economic development announcements in the last year than it has had in the last 10 to 15 years. So he said that we had our best year ever with job announcements and capital investments. At the same time, there were several industries that were struggling, and we're just keeping our eye on it. To me, it sounds like the local economic development leadership is pretty capable, and it was kind of refreshing to hear that they seem to have a handle on what was coming here, versus being caught completely flat-footed, which is, I think, what you see most of the time.
Right.
But they're all responding to this like, yeah, kind of we saw this coming. The writing was on the wall. So I think that's good, because sometimes when you get caught unaware, that's when the local officials start scrambling to save a plant that may not be worth saving. And then you just sort of prolong the drama, and then it happens again 18 months later or whatever, after you give them all this money. And so here it just sounded a lot more measured, like, hey, we saw this coming. We have some good news to soften the blow, and we have some plans in place to kind of reappropriate these workers. So he was even bullish about making use of this vacated building potentially.
Right.
For its part, Timken is providing a lot of notice. They're kind of preparing them that this is going to wind down, but they're saying every worker is going to get at least 60 days of notice before they shut down or before they lose their jobs. It's such a difference, I think, when this stuff is done right. So it feels more like a bump in the road versus like a catastrophe for this community, which is how it could have gone. And so I think with the economic conditions kind of underpinning this, many businesses still in growth mode, I don't think that hurts either. And I'm hoping that this is just going to be like a little blip for the area.
Not like the company that texted everybody at midnight.
Right, exactly. Yeah, nothing like that.
Jeff, what were your thoughts on Timken closing? It's a company that has many plants across the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a $4 billion company. It's obviously it's a global entity. I think when these things hit, you always, and Anna touched on it, so did you, you think about that local community. I mean, Gaffney's not a huge city, like 12,000 people. When you look at some of the economics there, population's been kind of flat over the last 20 years. Medium income, household income, a little bit lower than average, both for South Carolina as well as the country. So you do have some concerns there. I think what is and you guys touched on it too, there is a manufacturing infrastructure in place, hopefully to absorb these 225 workers, especially when you look at BMW's big Spartanburg facility is about a half an hour away. Around that facility, when we've talked about this as well, there is a huge automotive infrastructure that has come into that area in support of that BMW manufacturing plant. So yeah, you do hope, and with the labor situation, people looking for qualified workers, that this can be absorbed without too much impact, because although it's by no means a depressed economic area, you could see something like this having that type of trickle-down effect long-term if there isn't some way to absorb that economic loss, both from the facility, from a tax base, as well as from all these people who don't have jobs now. Another interesting factor about Gaffney, their mayor's name is Randy Moss.
Oh,
not the Randy Moss.
Randy Moss.
I thought we had a real story there for a minute, but
he really went on to a career change.
Yeah, definitely.
One thing I was curious about, other than learning more about this new Randy Moss in my life,
He is a doctor.
Oh, he is just really
it's taken
improved
off.
himself.
Yeah.
So the company did the generic statement about how all employees will be able to apply for other opportunities within other plants in the company. Should there be a regional, like an acceptable distance where if they're far enough away, they can't say that? Because I feel like every company that has at least more than one plant, if there's ever a layoff, they're like, hey, they can apply for other jobs.
I know. That annoys me as well.
And it was just like, and so when I looked into it, I'm like, oh, well, there is the plant about an hour away. So, if it was just a transition period, maybe you could excuse that kind of commute. Maybe if you were working 10s or 12s, something like that, with a weird hybrid schedule. But Timken has 4 plants in Ohio. They're about 8 hours away. So I think that at some point it should just be like, all right, if you don't have another plant within, 50 miles, don't say that.
All you got to do is just uproot your family.
Yeah, get your kids out of
sell your house.
Yeah. And move away, but you'll still have some support. I don't know. It's just one thing that's constantly frustrating.
Grinds your gears?
It grinds.
Because it's not a great offer.
It grinds my gear, and
It's not. If I can, and I agree with you. Okay.
Yeah.
Play devil's advocate. I think one of the things it does do, if you're a company like Timken with a global footprint like that, it does express one of the benefits potentially.
True.
If you're a single person, maybe you're looking for a change of scenery or something, that's there, I guess. I'm not going to say it's the strongest promotional point, but it does offer another potential, I guess, benefit. I don't know if that's the right term.
Well, and it doesn't make Timken look like they're maybe
like shutting down,
suffering. Yeah, it's like, well, we have this whole other set of factories here that are just fine, right?
Yeah. Local officials, and you'd mentioned this about how the closure could be a boon for nearby manufacturers with job openings. So I went to check it out on Indeed. Within 25 miles of Gaffney, there are currently 600 open manufacturing jobs.
Oh, good.
And some of these Indeed postings are actually more than one job. It says, we have all of these postings available on all of these shifts. If you fill out this one form, you're available for all of them.
Wow.
So there are many, many open jobs in the area. There are 54 job openings in manufacturing in Gaffney. So no moving whatsoever. All right. Our next most popular story. Jeff, it's common thread. Is this one of them?
Yeah. This one got me going.
We're going to follow the thread. Wyoming lawmakers seek to ban EVs by 2035. Senate Joint Resolution 4 is co-sponsored by several Republican state senators in Wyoming. The bill was written to ensure the stability of the state's, quote, proud and valued oil and gas production industry. Senator Jim Anderson says the bill pushes back against measures banning internal combustion vehicles in states like California and New York. The bill wants to phase out the sale of new electric vehicles by 2035. It also claims it will help the state avoid dealing with the recycling or disposal of metals and minerals used to produce EVs. The lawmakers also cite the lack of EV charging infrastructure and a reluctance to provide the power needed for EV chargers. However, after all the sound bites had been recorded, the lawmakers admitted that it's largely a symbolic action. Senator Brian Boner, bill co-sponsor, referred to the legislation as, quote, tongue-in-cheek. Jeff, Does Senator Boner have nothing better to do with his time?
All right.
Here we go.
So you guys roll your eyes a lot when I use that blocking and tackling analogy when I talk about the thing that leads to the thing.
No more, accept it.
One of the things my kids will roll their eyes about when I talk about dwelling on the problem instead of focusing on a solution.
Oh, yeah.
And that is what these quote unquote leaders in Wyoming are doing right now. Okay, so first of all, they do have a fair point here. When you look at oil and gas and mining, it accounts for somewhere between 20 and 25% of the GDP of Wyoming, as well as employment.
Okay.
So we're looking at like $7+ billion. Now, here's the thing. There's still options with all of that work, okay? Oil isn't just for transportation, okay? Now, a big part of it, yes. Mining for coal, yeah, a big part of that goes towards energy, but a lot of it doesn't as well. So you're not losing 25% of your GDP, you are going to lose some. As you just alluded to, there's a lot of other stuff here. Okay? When you look at EVs, if there's this issue in terms of recycling, which there is, and dealing with a lot of these rare earth minerals and recycling the batteries, hey, you know what, Wyoming? If you're going to lose one industry, maybe you look at starting another one here instead of just putting your head in the sand. Because if you start outlawing EVs in Wyoming, they're just going to go to Nebraska or Colorado or someplace else. And all you've done is taken money out of the pocket of all of those auto dealerships because they can't sell EVs. Even though the auto dealers are saying, all we're going to make in the next 15 years is EVs. Good call. And then the topper is there something, you know, it's not going to really, we're not going to really do it. We were just sitting around the bar having some beers and we thought this would be kind of fun.
Yeah, we're just joshing you.
I mean, this is such a waste of time and energy. Every one of these guys should be kicked out and lose their jobs because they're not doing what they're supposed to. Yeah. Talking about people owing money back for salaries, these freaking guys do, okay? Every one of them for even bringing this up. Yeah. They're hurting their state. They're not leading. And this also goes into the stuff California is doing. Why would California ban electric vehicle sales? Or excuse me, internal combustion engine sales? Again, they're not saying you can't have one. They're just saying you can't sell a new one. So all that's going to happen is people in California, if they want an internal combustion engine vehicle, they're going to go to another state and buy one. They're going to go to Arizona. They're going to go to Nevada. They're going to go to Oregon, wherever. All you're doing is taking money out of the pockets of your own constituents by doing these types of things. The market will dictate what happens. Forcing this type of thing upon people, and from a product perspective, unless you're going to somehow go the limit of saying no EVs can be in these state lines, this is preposterous and ridiculous and a complete waste of time. And there's nothing that alienates me more than bureaucrats and politicians getting up there and just trying to make headlines by saying ridiculous things that are never going to come to fruition.
Yeah.
Way to go.
The only way this is excusable is if it is a giant stack of paper with the name of the bill on top and then a bunch of empty pages that just say, just kidding. Because the fact that this was written and the fact that it was introduced, Anna, is what burns me the most. Because it's just, think of the time and energy that went into this. So that way they could get their clip on TV and just be like, we really got to start thinking about this. And this is going to push the conversation forward. But we know this is kind of just a joke.
I know. I think we're all in the same car here on this one. This is just, it was very frustrating to read. I can't imagine that their constituents would respond well to what is clearly a gimmick and a huge waste of time for everyone, especially in an era where government just feels so dysfunctional. There's so much partisan fighting. There's so much intra-party fighting. There's so much gridlock. Like, why? We got a lot of problems to deal with. This is like a joke. Not to mention that, you know, they talk about California. Like, we got to be honest, though, that like the will of a state like California, which is equivalent to what, like the 5th largest economy in the world or something, carries a bit more weight than that as a state that has like 500,000 people in it total. I mean, it's just that's just a completely different economy. It's a different market, you know. Maybe that's the reason for the tongue-in-cheek legislation is they just don't have enough to do. But I don't know. I get
like
it.
If it actually went through, everyone else would just be like, Fine.
Yeah.
But Wyoming has problems too.
Well, I know.
Address the problems.
The problems. And I agree that, people and businesses and legislators are feeling protective of oil and gas, right? They see that this is a moneymaker in lots of areas, part of their local economy, and they want to protect it. There's a lot of jobs hanging in the balance. I get that. But I also do believe in global warming, and I believe that it is caused by human activities, and that's because the scientific community is pretty much in consensus on that. We need to make some hard choices out of necessity, and you can see that the fossil fuel industry is also diversifying. They are coming up with solutions, to Jeff's point.
Yeah, Shell just bought Volta today.
Yeah. Because they know the writing's on the wall, and joke legislation designed at creating discourse is just a waste of everybody's time. Like, we have done nothing but talk about electric cars for like 10 years. The discourse is already taking place. It's taken place. Mm-hmm. This is not, this is like what you're putting on a pin so people talk about cancer or something. Like, that is just a useless gesture. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. It was very frustrating to read. I agree. And I don't think that they got out of it what they had hoped to.
Well, the thing I don't get is, have your opinions on the environment, okay? Whatever. There are some people who are going to doubt everything you just said. Mm-hmm. I can't do anything about that. That's your right to have your opinion. Purely from an economic perspective, if your state is set to lose $2 billion off of its GDP, which potentially, if everything goes electric, okay, tomorrow everything flips over and it's electric, and there's no oil used for transportation, that's what you're looking at. Figure out a way to replace that.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't sit here and do this. Sorry. I've already been over it. I don't want to repeat myself, but it's so frustrating because these are supposed to be our leaders.
Yeah. Well, these leaders next election season can have the ad that's like the black and white with the EV vehicle that says, California wants to shove an EV down your throats. Senator Boner said, no thanks, California. It's a template that's already out there that Senator Boner and Senator Anderson are going to use. The other quotes that I just pulled out from Senator Jim Anderson was, the legislature would be saying, if you don't like our petroleum cars, well, we don't like your electric cars. Maybe it's because I'm surrounded by toddlers on a daily basis at my home life. But that sounds like a 4-year-old. That sounds like a 4-year-old that doesn't want to have dinner even though his tummy's empty. Come on, Jim, get yourself a little dinner and put a smile on your face.
Okay, but can't you imagine this conversation and also, like, your dad or your brothers, you're sitting around the bar after, having a couple of beers. And you're like, you know what we should do? Yeah. Let's just do this. This is what we're going to do. We're just not going to let them in.
We're going to show those guys.
Oh, they're going to hate it too.
And then 3 out of 4 of them show up the next day. And the one guy's got 400 pages printed out. And he's like, I did a Jerry Maguire and just did it last night.
Guys, we were just drinking. I wasn't serious.
Hours.
Yeah, sorry, Jim. It's a pass for us. Yeah. But no, you know what? They overcame it and they did it.
They sure
Way
did.
to go, Wyoming. It'll make for a funny looking state quarter. All right, our most popular story this week. CEO suffers massive hit following solid gold beer can controversy. James Watt is the CEO and co-founder of Brewdog, a brewery and pub chain in Scotland. In 2020, Brewdog hid 50 special beer cans in cases for customers to find. These cans were said to be made from solid gold and valued at approximately $18,000. Customers who found the golden cans could keep the can, win more than $12,000 of Brewdog shares, and receive a VIP tour of Brewdog's brewery. Unfortunately for Watt, he made some costly mistakes. Some believed that the cans were made from solid gold, but they were actually gold-plated and mostly brass. Watt incorrectly referred to the cans as, quote, solid gold on Twitter. That Twitter machine getting another one. Disgruntled winners contacted the Advertising Standards Authority, a UK advertising regulator. The ASA said the ads were misleading. Watt reached out to the 50 winners individually and personally offered them the full cash amount. It wound up costing him $571,000. You really need to You know, we joke about the fine print on commercials and ads a lot, but this is a reminder that it's there for a reason.
Yeah. When you're using the term solid gold, though, in the marketing, and speaking also to the value of each of these cans, using this very specific figure of $18,000, I don't really know if I buy the story that he got so carried away that he like oopsied and like completely misrepresented what these were. Whether or not this whole thing transpired because he got caught, I don't know. But it seems a bit suspect that you wouldn't have a better handle on what these were when you're making these types of extravagant claims. We do know that he's out $500,000, and it makes you want to feel a bit bad for him and laud him for doing the right thing, which I know some people did. But I don't. Because what we don't know is how much money they made on this promotion when the prize was represented as being much greater than it actually was. And I don't know, like it came to mind because the recent like Mega Millions lottery was very high. It was like over $1 billion. And I know that based on personal experience, like we all throw in and buy those tickets. I know they sell a lot more lottery tickets when they've got that super big prize because people think, oh, it's worth it this time. It's just a classic risk reward, right?
Yeah.
What about this guy's own risk reward strategy? Because if you look at the ruling that took place with the ASA, they included this note, which I found interesting. Brewdog said the cans were gold plated rather than solid gold, and that their social media posts, which contained the words solid gold, did so in error. However, they explained that they were unable to amend tweets, and therefore, rather than delete the tweet, they ensured that subsequent tweets dropped the word solid. And all references thereafter were to gold cans only. Why didn't they delete the tweet when they...
Delete the tweet?
Yeah, why didn't they delete the tweet? Because they wanted to sell more beer and continue on with this campaign, right? So...
but they changed it going forward. That makes no sense to me.
I don't know. It was a very weird scenario, but to me, it seems like they could have like maybe fixed this problem at the beginning when they figured out what had gone wrong, but they didn't. And then they never said anything. They waited to get caught.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe he saw that this could have been a scandal that, you know, wouldn't necessarily cause a lot of harm to him financially or PR-wise, and might actually be, because it was funny, a lot of really good free PR.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like in this case, you wonder how much more beer he sold just letting this thing ride that maybe made up for the payout in the end that he had to pay back this $500,000 or whatever. I mean, that information is not available to us. Yeah. But it seems strange that they never, upon finding out that they had made a mistake, didn't halt this campaign and make some changes. I don't know.
So was the entire value of the promotion $18,000, and that included the $12,000 in shares, the VIP tour, and then the gold-plated can? Maybe that was where he went wrong?
I don't know.
Saying that it was an $18,000 can versus an $18,000 package?
No, I think the problem was that he said that can was solid gold, but it was just gold-plated, and you were supposed to be you'd find like the can.
Yeah.
And then you'd send it in and get a real solid gold can.
If you want it.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, one thing I looked at, so he said these cans were valued at $18,000 each. And if you multiply that times 50 cans that are out there, he was looking at $900,000 in terms of potential expense, right? Almost $1 million in promotion. So if he gets away with only $571,000 that he has to pay, I mean, that's kind of a bargain.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of confusion internally and externally in the way this was communicated. Okay, now that doesn't put him off the hook. I read his LinkedIn post. I read the other stuff. It seemed to me like a sincere apology, like we were dumb. We shouldn't have done it this way. We screwed up. Here's what I did. Yeah. He did take the money. The $500,000 came out of his own pocket, which I think offers another sort of measure of sincerity in terms of his...
Jeff fell for it.
I don't know, trying to make good on what he did. Yeah, usually I'm the more negative one. You guys are really ganging up on this guy.
I'm not ganging up on him.
I guess when I look at these promotions, there has never been a reason that I have bought a product specifically because of the promotion or bought more of it because of that. Maybe that's just me. I mean, outside of our producer, Alex, trying to win a truck and keeping hams pretty much in business.
We did do that collectively.
Because I haven't seen or personally experienced anybody being like, I got to get this product in order to, get more entries into this drawing or whatever. So I don't know. It's an interesting company too. This guy does have kind of a track record of being rather self-deprecating, if you will. He posted on LinkedIn the 10 biggest mistakes his company has made in terms of like management people they brought in. So now they have a salary cap at this company. Like nobody will make more than X times more than the lowest level individual.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
They're a carbon neutral manufacturer. So there are a lot of other benefit things and kind of just interesting dynamic with the company. They do things other than beer. They get into other spirits. I think they do gin for sure, David. They also do a lot of different franchising with bars and stuff like that, which is also a big revenue generator for them. So again, maybe there was more stuff beneath the surface here in terms of him trying to be sneaky and get away with stuff. To me, it feels like there was it was a bad idea, a bad concept. And they did what they could to make up for it afterwards. I don't think anybody was put out because they didn't get a solid gold beer can.
They do have gin. Go ahead.
Yeah. And yeah, I think only Willy Wonka can do this. Like we've seen people try to recreate it. It's never worked. There's no good way to do it unless it's like just the pure 5 golden tickets and go to the Creepy Factory. That's the only way.
We don't know if it didn't work. Who was the person that won the Candy Factory in the Willy Wonka type? Maybe that's up and running and everything's going great.
We should Google that and find out
definitely do a
what is
follow-up.
the situation
See if
there.
the windows are just dark.
Yeah.
I do have a question for Alex, maybe Eric, but I think Alex probably buys the most cases of beer of anybody in this room. Alex, could you tell if a case was, 6 ounces heavier?
He says
is that
no.
enough? No, he says no. Because it would be, if it was actually a gold can, it would be heavier. Like it's like gold is, 7 times heavier than aluminum. Now you're looking at a very limited amount.
Yeah.
But the gold can wasn't supposed to be in there. It was like a fake gold can that you would send in for the real gold can. So I don't think you could trick
couldn't do it that way.
Game the system that way.
And I'll say, even though those cases are supposed to weigh the same, there are some mornings or some afternoons where they feel light as a feather, and then there are some evenings where they feel heavy as a ton of bricks.
Where are we going with this? Is this a metaphor?
I would say,
Is David going dark?
nah, I never go dark. And no, I'm more on the side that if all of this wasn't foreseen or pre-planned, that he wound up falling into a very happy accident here. And based on the tenor and what he posts on social media, it seems like maybe he could have seen this coming and just like, hey, okay, if this solid gold promotion goes well, hey, maybe we sell a lot of beer. But if it blows up in our face, millions of people are going to know who Brewdog is and they're going to come looking. And I think if it cost him that out of his pocket, I don't know.
That is a pretty ingenious scheme, if that's indeed. That is a whole new level of marketing promotion.
He did it just to trick Jeff.
Mission accomplished. I'm not buying Brewdog, but
I'm going to, this gin looks nice. Actually, it doesn't. It looks kind of bottom shelf, but it says low stock, so it must be in high demand.
It's Australian.
All right. Well, before we move into, in case you missed it, the stories that maybe weren't as popular on the website, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward, we have another word from our sponsor.
Oil Eater's household cleaners, industrial cleaners, and industrial equipment are specifically designed to replace dangerous solvents and are used throughout the world. Our safe, water-based formula dissolves grease and grime for almost any surface and leaves a fresh, non-chemical scent. Our ultra-concentrated formulas are perfect for light, medium, or heavy cleaning and can be used on shop floors, in parts washers, to clean equipment, and more. VOC compliant, Oil Eater will do an excellent job in a multitude of applications, safely and cost-effectively, while reducing your chemical usage. Safe for the user, safe for the surfaces being cleaned, and safe for the environment. For more information, visit oileater.com or call 800-528-0334.
And we're back. And just a reminder that if you click the link in the live chat or in the description for the podcast, you can get yourself a free sample of Oil Eater. So go and do that and tell them that the Today in Manufacturing podcast sent you, in the event that there's a place to put that. If not, just put it in your pocket.
Not tell him Large Marge sent you.
And before we get into, in case you missed it, I wanted to just mention that these cases of beer being purchased in the morning were for like a tailgate situation, maybe like just preparing for the barbecue, getting them in the house before everyone comes over.
During the sponsor break, we had a bit of an intervention with David. So a really quick one, but
it's fine. Get your cases in the morning before they sell out. All right. In case you missed it, the story's not as popular on our websites like manufacturing.net and in.com, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. I'll go first this week. I picked Britishvolt's Gigaplant Flatlines. So last August, we talked about Britishvolt and their EV battery Gigaplant project in Northeast England. It was an ambitious project that aimed to supply 30 gigawatt hours of batteries to give the nation's auto industry a real boost. This week, the battery startup filed documents that will appoint bankruptcy administrators. Britishvolt received some short-term funding late last year, bit of a lifeline, but it wasn't enough. On Tuesday, the company laid off most employees, and now it looks like this once ambitious $4.64 billion plant won't be the rebirth of Big England Auto. Instead, it looks like it's going to be scrapped for parts. We talked about concerns over picking a winner when this originally came out, and this is another failure that could have been prevented, in my opinion, with taking a little bit more care. I don't know if you guys had a chance to see this story, but sometimes we see a Lordstown or we see these startups that sort of are able to hang on for a long time, but Britishvolt just seemed to really flame out fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This was kind of a sad one because I remember when we talked about this one initially, and I was more optimistic. I mean, there were some issues there at that point from an economic perspective, from a financing perspective, and I really thought somehow things would come together and this would work out given more time. Mm-hmm. But I think you have to, on one hand, really applaud the practicality or the common sense dynamic that was put in place here. It wasn't going to generate the return as quickly as it needed to, and they cut the cord. It is unfortunate. It is kind of sad because this is one you would have hoped could have worked out. Just in looking at, again, building up that electric vehicle infrastructure everywhere. I mean, this is across the pond, but still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anna, this is going to be the fourth largest building in the country. Doesn't look like we're going to see it happen.
Yeah, and I remember being frustrated at the time we first talked about this when they were fledgling on the podcast. And I think we were all a bit concerned over the fact that the British government had selected this particular company for this all-in on EV battery production for England, considering that they were just founded a few years prior to that.
Yeah, it's like 3 years old at the time.
And to me, that makes zero sense. There's so many battery manufacturers out there that I'm sure would be pleased to send some, investment dollars over and have a lock on the market over in the UK with domestic production there. Tons of companies that already have battery manufacturing down. So to put millions, billions into this that was essentially a startup didn't make any sense to me. And obviously this did not work out.
No, the UK government provided tens of millions of pounds of support. And that lifeline did give them a little bit of time to talk to potential suitors. So they had 3 potential buyers come in with bids around $36.8 million. And these were from early investors, but they were rejected by Britishvolt's creditors. Sometimes it makes me wonder, what are you looking for? It's like you have 3 people that were involved in the project early, kind of want to see it through fruition. They're getting, I don't even know if it's pennies on the dollar, less than pennies on the dollar, but, still something that could have happened in maybe a smaller form factor.
It's just what I was going to say. Like, why such a big swing?
Yeah.
I mean, if you had 36 point whatever it was million, I mean, you could do some damage there.
Right.
Why go for the 4.6 billion right away?
No, well, sorry to see it go, but again, just another cautionary tale that all the eggs don't need to go in a single basket.
So many cautionary tales.
So many cautionary tales. That's what we'll
the
title
new
this
name
one.
of our podcast.
Yeah, today in cautionary tales. Anna, what's your in case you missed it this week?
At the risk of getting into yet another argument with Jeff, I chose the story.
You're not worried about that.
No, I'm not.
David's the only one who's afraid of anybody.
Yeah, that's why we put him in the middle.
That's right.
So the story I selected was Home Depot is eliminating a controversial pay rounding practice that is a little bit more widespread in the retail industry that I think maybe not everyone knows about. But Home Depot has long tabulated wages of hourly workers by rounding their time up or down to the nearest 15-minute increment, a practice that they called common, and I think that is true. Recent worker lawsuits have reportedly alleged that the retailer was purposefully rounding down their pay and depriving them of earned wages. Home Depot has since announced that it will dispense with the timesheet rounding practice and begin circulating hourly time down to the minute. Citing evolutions in, quote, laws, technology, and workplace practices, Home Depot plans to use exact time clock punches. According to Insider, who first reported this change, timesheet rounding is legal, but it has come under scrutiny in recent years. Specifically in 2022, a court ruled against Home Depot, saying that if the retailer was capable of capturing the exact number of minutes an employee worked, that they should be paid for those minutes. So Home Depot is doing, in my opinion, the right thing here, although under duress. I agree with the court that said that if the technology exists, that they should use it. I can't confirm whether the company was deliberately rounding down. That sounds like one of those things that's probably really hard to prove if you're an employee.
Yeah.
But, you know, an issue that can obviously be buttoned up by just paying by the minute. For what it's worth, the employee who filed the suit on this claimed that the company had, over the course of it, 4.5 years, denied her 470 minutes of pay.
Oh, okay.
Home Depot's position on this was that the system that it had in place was neutral. But I think a neutral system in this case need not exist when the technology is there to do it in an exact way. And it's a defensible position, I think, for a multi-billion-dollar corporation, but it feels less fair when you're on the other side of it and you're working on your feet all day for $15 an hour and you want to get paid for every minute that you're there. I think that's reasonable. So, you know, why deal with the fallout, the court cases, the negative pushback from employees, the publicity? Just seems like it was best for everyone to move forward in this way.
No, that's the biggest thing for me is it works out to, she missed out basically on 8 hours of pay. It was like a one day's pay. But when I had worked for companies that did this rounding, it made no sense to me. If anything, it incentivized me to figure out how to cheat it.
Yeah.
To just be like, okay, to know that I've got to be, that I can punch out like 8.5 minutes early or leave or get there 8.5 or like what, 7.5 minutes late.
Yeah.
And they'd still round and I'd be fine. It's one of those sticking points that I think causes unnecessary turmoil between an employer and its employees. Jeff, what did you think about this rounding practice?
I was actually surprised that a company like Home Depot would still use it. Because like you alluded to, I mean, it's there. The technology is there. It's not real complicated. It would just seem to make sense. And again, when you're looking at retaining and recruiting more workers, doing something like this, it just seems to make more sense.
The one thing about that, though, is that the technology is out there. We got to stop giving big companies the benefit of the doubt in terms of investing in the state of the art or like technology that's out there. I know it's related to the aviation industry, but the whole story with Southwest and how that came crashing down because they just continued to use antiquated technology that was old 20 years ago. I don't know. That just kind of opened my eyes as to when a story like this came across. It's like, no, it makes sense that they never really upgraded because it's just like, it's always worked. Why do we got to spend money to change it? Jeff, what is your in case you missed it this week?
This is another one that kind of got me going, guys. This is about Amazon. 3 of their Amazon warehouses were fined for ergonomic hazards. So OSHA cited Amazon for failing to keep workers safe and has issued hazard alert letters after inspections at warehouse facilities in Florida, Illinois, and New York. OSHA found that workers were exposed to ergonomic hazards. Specifically, OSHA cited the company for violations of the General Duty Clause in the OSHA Act, which requires employers to provide safe workplaces. The agency also cited the company for exposing workers at the Florida location to struck-by hazards. Similar investigations at 3 Amazon locations in Colorado, Idaho, and New York are ongoing. So basically, there was a lot of different things that this company, which is valued at $900 billion, was doing, that would seem pretty easy to avoid getting in trouble for. What really got me, guess what this $900 billion company was fined by OSHA?
$899 billion.
60,200. Where is the exact number here? It was just over $60,000.
$269.
Yeah.
That'll
A
teach you.
real financial blow.
$900 billion. And they got fined $60,000. I'm sure they are just don't know what to do. I'm sure they are just scurrying around like ants on a trampled anthill to try to figure out how to resolve all of these horrendous safety concerns for their workers because they care so much about them. Mm-hmm. Thank God OSHA stepped in. What would we do without this incredibly important government agency dropping the hammer on these criminals in the occupational safety sector? I mean, I am glad. I shouldn't say that. OSHA, I'm glad they got in there. I am glad they're doing what they're supposed to do and looking at everybody across the board. But this is where we fall down again. Mm-hmm. These types of penalties need to be scaled according to the size of the enterprise. Mm-hmm. This is preposterous. You're gonna seriously? I mean, Amazon probably like that falls out of their pocket.
Yeah, I'm surprised they even,
And then what's going to happen. They're going to appeal it, and it's going to get knocked down by another 10 or 15, and then they're really going to be laughing about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, isn't part of the problem that we've dulled OSHA's hammer to the point that it has no teeth?
Again, they're doing what they're supposed to.
Yeah.
But the system is broken when that's the fine that gets levied.
Yeah.
That is my whole thing here. It's good that they're being investigated. It's good that they're going in there. We've got workers who are underpaid, stressed out, doing a ton of work here, did a ton of work through the pandemic, all of those things. And if we really are going to have a government agency focused on occupational safety, focus on occupational safety and do something that's actually going to change patterns and behaviors.
Yeah.
This will not do it.
Mm-hmm.
You can write as many headlines as you want. That's not going to stop people from renewing their Prime membership.
No, I think that Amazon paid for this fine in the first 3 words that you started with, just in terms of how much they make per second. No, I worked on this story, and I was up until that last line, everything sounded great. Right. Just like, they're getting in there. They're getting into multiple locations. They're really going to try and help all these workers that are suffering from these different types of injuries. Yep. And then you get to the bottom and you're just like, oh, that is not a lot. Not a lot. The other thing that kind of struck me, and I don't know if you felt the same way, is that all of these injuries are traditional warehouse worker injuries. Mm-hmm. And you feel like $1 trillion company, or any warehouse for that matter.
It's only $900 billion.
Sorry.
Now to
I rounded up. Sorry. Some people can't do it. I can't do it. No. Is there anything being done when it comes to warehouse worker safety to eliminate these types of injuries? Or is it just that this is the cost of doing business if you want that role?
No, I think that people are trying to work out these problems, because the fact of the matter is, like, even though a musculoskeletal injury is not considered a severe injury where it still puts people out of work, it really can be debilitating for people's quality of life. Mm-hmm. And think about how much that would limit your amount of time that you could even do that job. So then you're looking at worker replacements and things like that. So I think that there is an impetus for these warehouses and these distributors to figure out a way to make that better. And the technology is there to help improve that. And to Jeff's point, like, Amazon knows that they can do better, right? I don't know, though. Maybe they need the money, because I just saw yesterday that they discontinued the Amazon Smile program. Did anyone see that?
Yeah, I did see that.
That was very disappointing to a lot of people. I think it was a program where you could make your purchases on their smile.amazon.com, and then they would donate a percent, I think, to the charity of your choice. And I know that a lot of smaller, more local charities relied on that money a lot, and they just pulled the plug on it.
And their excuse for it was obnoxious too, where they're just like, they came out and said, we have 1 million charities on here, mm-hmm. and we're spread so thin that it's like we can't do any good. Well, instead of discontinuing the entire program as a part of your ongoing cost cutting, which is what you're really doing, mm-hmm. pick a handful. Pick 10. Yeah. Pick 500,000, cut it in half, so you can make more of an impact. Don't just say, like, there are too many, it got to be too much, so we just nixed the entire operation.
Well, and I'm sure that all the local, like, dog rescues and stuff, like the organizations that are using those, they would probably disagree with that assessment that they're not doing any good. I mean, I'm sure that they rely on every single dollar that they can get. And so I don't know why they did that.
The other thing, when you look at these injuries, we need these workers badly. Amazon isn't just, sending out the next round of, Halloween candy here. I mean, it's also medical stuff. It's also a lot of things that are important that they're processing through those warehouses.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we need these folks and we need them to be taken care of.
Well, and to the point about the labor crisis, to Amazon's point, they're running out of people. So stop beating up the ones that you have, take better care of them, and maybe you won't have so many problems finding workers. All right. Well, before we get out of here this week, let's move on to our final thoughts. Anna, what's your final thought this week?
So I had a realization over the last couple of weeks where we've had some unseasonably mild winter weather here in Wisconsin. Usually January is abysmal, and I rue every second of 20 degrees in snow. But we did not have snow for 3 weeks on the ground. And there is nothing to do with 2 5-year-olds and a 7-year-old outside when it is 25 degrees and there's no snow. So we got some snow last night, and everyone was thrilled. We went to school early so they could play before any of the other kids got there on the playground. But I think I like snow now. I don't know what happens at a certain point in your life where you just become just this completely different person, but I'm I can appreciate it now for what it is. I don't know why. I don't know what happened.
There are a couple of things there. One is that there are plenty of things you can do with your kids outside when it's 25 and wet. You just have to be prepared for that full strip down at the door. You can't, especially you're outnumbered. That's where, you're going to lose one when they all come in.
There's boots flying.
Yeah.
Yes, I know.
Because you'll have 2 of them stripped down, but then the one with the boots is already in the living room. And you're like, come on.
I know. And they come in and they're so muddy. Snow is much cleaner than what is underneath snow in the winter.
Yeah. Luckily, the downstairs door is right by that back door. And so it's just close off downstairs. The washer's already running.
Yeah.
The other is, I talked about how we have a new puppy and talking about it snowing. I love watching the snow blow my little puppy's mind. It was the most wholesome moment last night because it started snowing, but it was it was colder, so it was louder. And she just went outside and looked, sat on the deck and kept trying to look at the snow as it was falling and hitting her on the face. And I'm just I could be here all evening watching this. And then she turned around and looked at me. I'm I'll come out there with you.
Yeah.
Sure, let's just watch the snow. So it reminded me of that. My final thought this week is just I'm kind of done with illness in general. They tell you that your kids catch it all and then they stop catching it. And I want to know what that inflection point is.
Yeah.
Because it is we've been going up and down with fevers lately, and luckily both my wife and I have positions where we can be a little bit more flexible and work from home. And I understand that some people don't have that flexibility. And honestly, I do not know. I talked to some of the guys in my card game, and they were talking about their kids trying to manage sick kids with their careers. I do not know how so many people manage sick children with other careers. Just because I know that a lot of careers in the manufacturing industry are very stringent in terms of, if you can go home and what you can go home for without getting docked or hit with points, stuff like that. And so, I'm very thankful for the situation we're in. But B, if you are strict about that, maybe think twice about kind of the leniency that you can afford parents, because sometimes it's unreasonable that you need 2 incomes to support a household, and yet it's untenable if you have a family and somebody's sick. Jeff, your final thought.
Yeah, fortunately, my kids are old enough I don't have to deal too much with that anymore, but I can feel your pain there. You're talking about your dog in the snow. I can remember when we had my nephews up from Arizona, and we gave them snow pants. And they just looked at what are these? What do we do with this? And then they actually got out in the snow and they were walking on it. It was like watching somebody on the moon. Just what is this? Not knowing what it is. So lots of fun in the snow. Final thoughts. I just wanted to say I was telling you guys about this book I recently read called The Arsenal of Democracy by J.A. and I'm going to probably get his last name wrong here. A.J. Bamey. Arsenal of Democracy. It's a really good book. It's an easy read. It's basically about Ford in particular and how they were asked to scale up and transition manufacturing during World War II. It's a really interesting look at terms of the inner workings of Ford didn't know as much about Henry Ford, not real great stuff there, but also how, the real hero of the story is Edsel Ford, his son, and the stuff that he did and what all the transitions they made. It's actually amazing from both a historical perspective as well as just historical, factual, manufacturing tie-in. It's a great book. It's an easy read. Highly, highly recommend it.
It's okay to go back and learn from history. That's how we don't repeat it.
Well, this one was cool. Just talk about how, one of the things that came out, just the inner workings of Ford. I was telling you guys this. They were billionaires 100 years ago. Just
that's
fathom
insane.
that. It's incredible.
Yeah.
The other thing I just wanted to, that was kind of interesting. So my daughters are in finals week, but it's no longer called finals week. It's called wrap-up week.
They don't want the pressure.
Wow. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
That's what the guess is, and that was another eye roll that I had this week.
Success enablement week.
Just call it. I almost felt better when they called it finals. It's good. We're almost done.
Over. Yeah.
Wrap-up week. So just remember that one as you
navigate
the new educational system.
Are there no longer tests in wrap-up week? Is it just
there are finals.
high fives and just like, we did it, we made it,
we're out of here.
Do we got to prove we learned anything? No, not anymore. It's giving people anxiety. It's over.
Also the podcast poll, we asked, and actually I got to do a little better with these polls. The numbers have been down a little bit the last couple of weeks. I'm going to try to get these a little bit better. But we asked basically, if you weren't in manufacturing, what are some of the other different careers you may have gone into, whether it was retail, software, farming was an option, automotive repair. And one of the comments we got here from Joe, longtime viewer, he said, I've been in plastics for 22 years. I have a family that farms. I wish I could have gone into farming. I may someday decide to drop the engineer gig and work outdoors. It's hard work, but it's interesting to me. He goes on to say that he's actually restoring tractors, which is something he's got in common with you and your family.
Been there, Joe.
But the winner of the poll was actually vehicle service and repair. So if people were in manufacturing, looks like they still want to be working with their hands and doing those types of things.
Did anyone say retail?
No one said retail. It was pretty much vehicle repair or farming.
People, numbers were down because everyone is so happy in manufacturing they couldn't see themselves anywhere else.
Pretty much. Yeah. Must be.
Have you thought of a trivia question for next week?
I do have a different polling question. We'll see how this one, got a little contentious here when we were talking about it. So let's see what happens if we put this on the poll. Question is very simply, do you think paying back stolen time should become a standard practice? Ooh. More of a yes or no. See if we can get some comments there.
Oh, boy.
Should be interesting. Obviously, we disagreed a little bit between Anna and I, and David just stayed out of the fray because he's too worried about upsetting anybody.
Yeah.
But yes or no, do you think paying back stolen time should be a standard practice?
And just for everyone who's listening, if Jeff doesn't get enough responses to the questions, we're going to try to claw back his pay for this podcast.
That'll teach him. Oh, sorry, I don't have opinion. I don't want to hurt your feelings. Wait, no. Or my feelings? I don't want anyone to
Easy
hurt.
snowflake. You'll be okay.
Hey, I am a snowflake. There's no one else out there like me, thank goodness.
And then the second part of that is if you have any examples of employees that you felt were stealing time, we'd love to hear about those. Be some good discussion next week.
You want them to rat on people?
Not specifically, but I think we can all think of certain situations where that was definitely the case.
Oh, man, I want to fill this out. No, no, everyone's been a benefit. Wow, that might stir the pot a little bit. I'm interested to see what comes.
Yeah, should be a good one.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Subscribe to our daily and weekly newsletters. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. And please go to YouTube and subscribe to @IEN Magazine and come and join us live every Thursday at 1:30 p.m. For Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.